Are you the type of person who is afraid of showing up online and being too controversial? Who doesn't like to stir the pot or be too opinionated or simply just want to share anything that's too much online for fear of offending other people? I used to be that person too, and sometimes I feel myself slipping back into that mindset. And when I do, I check myself and then I head over to my friend Natalie Cooper's account on Instagram. Natalie is a brave, authentic, well educated, open minded, tuned in woman who's confidently posting about some pretty controversial topics. When I first met Natalie, I thought she was so sweet and kind. And as our relationship grew and I started listening to her podcast, I realized that she is such a source of confidence and authenticity. Her intentions are beautiful, and I just had to invite her on the show. So today I'm excited for you to listen in on Stick around to the end of our episode where I share this week's tip of the week to make sure that we are all aligning ourselves with the right values and not accidentally sharing something that could offend or lead someone to hit unfollow accidentally. Okay, so just tune into the end of the episode. Let's do this. You're listening to the Ashley Avis Podcast, the place to be for entrepreneurs who want to market and sell with confidence. Around here, we're chatting about personal branding, social media strategy, web design, email marketing, sales mastery, and so much more. My biggest mission is to help you effectively sell online with confidence and clarity. Ready to grow your business, bank account, and an online presence in a way that leaves you feeling liberated and excited? Subscribe and tune in every Tuesday with an open mind and a notepad. Let's do this. Hi, Natalie, and welcome to the show. Thank you for coming on and chatting with me today. Hi, Natalie, and welcome to the show. Thank you for coming on and chatting with me today.
Thank you. This is a dream. I'm so happy for you. You started this amazing podcast. You've just been killing it out there. I'm just so happy to be on. Thank you for having me.
Oh, come on. Well, thank you for being on the show. And it's cool because I think you're the first guest that I have that actually has a podcast of her own.
Yes. So, I mean, I wouldn't call myself any kind of a podcasting expert, but it is so much fun to have these conversations. I just love the space between people like this and sharing that together.
Awesome. Okay, so for those of you who don't know who you are, do you mind just telling us the good story about who you are, where you're from, what you do, and how you started Mind Your Own?
For sure, yes. So my name's Natalie Cooper. I am based in the Niagara region right now. And I started this platform about a year and a half ago called Mind Your Own. I offer mentorship services, some courses, some work there for people who are in the space of self-healing, specifically from physical disease, but I've also had some people I've supported through mental illness and some mental health stuff. So the reason why I started this platform was to kind of raise awareness of my own story and be an example of how we can be capable to heal ourselves and actually become active participants in the healing process versus just kind of going to the doctor, getting a diagnosis, and taking a pill and kind of being very disconnected from the process and not being able to advocate for your own self and what feels good to you. This is all birthed out of, and what feels good to you. This is all birthed out of, 5 years of self-healing from 2 chronic illnesses. I was diagnosed in 2015 with 2015. Wow. With MS. And 2 years before that, in 2013, I was diagnosed with Crohn's disease. So life has been really amazing. It's been transformative since that time. And I have decided that I wanted to put that out to the world that, we can really take an active role in the healing process. So that's why I'm here. That's what I do. I have a podcast, like you mentioned. And for people who are interested in astrology and such, I am a Virgo sun, a Taurus moon, and an Aries rising. And for human design geeks, I am a manifester. I'm a 5/1 emotional manifester. So that's me. Easy to know.
And if you are listening right now going, what the heck are they talking about? Just go listen to Natalie's episode all about human design on her podcast to catch yourself up to speed. Really fascinating, really cool. Cool.
It's
So
super cool.
I wanted to have you on this show because a lot of what we talk about on this show is surrounding this idea of confidence to put yourself out there and to have a very authentic, genuine presence online, especially when you're marketing and selling. And you came to mind as someone that I definitely wanted to have on the show because I feel like your confidence, just by telling your story and by some of the topics that you address on social media and on your podcast, they stem from this place of confidence, in my opinion. But I'd love for you to share a little bit about what confidence means to you and how you're emitting it these days.
It's a beautiful question. So, it was so interesting when you approached me and we had a conversation about, doing this podcast episode and hearing that you actually considered, what I'd been putting out there as, courageous or confident, having confidence behind it. And it's so funny because I actually haven't really thought of it in that way. My biggest commitment to myself in this space and on social media and beyond is just to be authentic and to be true to my own values and to consistently check in with my intuition, what feels right and good, and to continuously put that out there into the world. So with that has come growth and change and sometimes, embarrassing moments, sometimes things that, I take back. I've changed my mind on things, but in those moments that I am sharing publicly, it's always something that's true to my heart. And that's been so important for me. And I think that's why I've been able to stay pretty grounded. And I think that's why I've been able to stay pretty grounded. And I also just haven't felt the need to please everybody, which is actually very different from the way I have been for a really long time. Through my own childhood traumas and such, becoming a people pleaser into adulthood was something I really struggled with. And I made a commitment to myself when I started this new page, this new platform, that I wanted to be purely authentic to my own truths and what I was experiencing. And so much of what I've done is kind of against status quo. Mm-hmm. That I'm sure people consider it quite controversial. And I've had many beautiful conversations about that. But it's so aligned with my truth and who I am. So to me, it's like the controversy doesn't even really elevate to that level of my thinking. It's not about it being controversial. I do have a feeling sometimes when I'm making a post, like I don't want to hurt people. I don't want to offend people, but I don't want to hurt people. I don't want to offend people, but I have to stay true to that inner knowing. And that's what's really important for me on this journey.
Mm-hmm. For those of you listening who don't know what type of controversial topics Natalie is talking about, let me spread the word. I've been following you for so long, and you talk about so many different topics from like not taking the medications for your diseases, for example. I love that story. Also, your opinions on inclusivity, body image, death, racism, spirituality, vaccines, all of these different heavy topics that a lot of us are afraid to talk about. Not only that, but like sometimes when I know that you've posted a story, I'm like, I don't know if I'm ready to look at your story yet today, because you are so real and raw, and you're showing up with such genuine confidence. It's like about these topics that I'm like, ooh, that's too political, or ooh, that's like evoking a lot of emotion. It's like evoking a lot of emotion, but I know that you're coming from a place of love and you're being genuine. So it's almost like I need to lean into some of her content today, or maybe not, but sometimes I'm like, Ash, just lean into that. So I just wanted to share. And then also I wanted to ask, how do you choose which topics are worth discussing and which ones are not?
Wow. I just love that you kind of have that discernment. That is such an important part, just what you mentioned there, how you look at a story and you're like, I don't know if I'm ready for that today, or I don't know if I'm, want to be in that person's energy today. I need to kind of check in with myself. Like that consciousness on social media is just so key for like surviving in this digital world. Like just to have that moment with yourself to check in, because not everything is for everybody, right? And I know that's something that I have come to terms with, is not everybody is going to love what I'm sharing. Not everyone's going to connect with it. Not everyone's going to feel aligned. And that's something I just have to be okay with. So, I really think that's such a key point that you made, is having that moment with yourself. It's so mindless sometimes on social media to just be scrolling and not taking that time to really check in with yourself. It's like it's like checking out, it's automatic. And I think it's so beautiful to have, that little check in with yourself on what's what you're capable of taking in. And that's a beautiful thing. So good for you.
Thanks. I feel like it took a long time for me to get there, because it came from, I've been scrolling and scrolling and scrolling, and I'm really particular with who I'm following. But I noticed that when I close Instagram, I'm feeling a certain way, and I didn't know why. I'm like, ooh, why am I feeling like that right now? And I noticed that with a lot of your content that you post, I would close the app and I'm like, ooh, I'm feeling this right now. Like, what did Natalie say? And it's like, I noticed that your content is a little bit heavier than most, or a little more controversial than most, in terms of not being super radical or offensive. No, not like that kind of controversy. More like, I'm going to shake this up and put something real and raw out there for you guys to make you feel something. And I don't know if that's your intention when you choose your topics or not, but
it's funny. Like, yeah, I mean, it's funny that you ask it in that way. I read a post the other day that was just so beautiful, and I'm going to butcher it, but it was something along the lines of, when you're coming onto somebody's personal social media page, you're basically coming into their home. You're basically coming into their space that they are hopefully, curating to be them, right? To be who they are, what they believe in, their values, all of that. And, if you don't like that place, and you don't feel good in it, the door is basically always open. I don't want to entice people to come to my space and have to feel things. It's definitely, that's not the intention. But what is just, again, coming back to that authenticity. So you asked me kind of before what kinds of things I decide to talk about. Yeah. And it's really, really personal. So, we had a conversation about death on the podcast. And, my mom almost died last year. She was waiting on a liver donor. She needed a liver transplant, and we couldn't find a donor. And it really made me confront the idea of death. I lost 2 grandparents in the last year, and I had never really been in that space. And I wanted to explore that. And that was coming, and again, rooted from my personal beliefs and values. Another had to come to terms with my body and learn to love and accept myself, or at least feel, a level of neutrality about my body. Something I've been really working on. So I like to have conversations about that on the podcast. I like to share, about that on the page. And then, with self-healing and deciding not to go on medication, what I'm trying to do there is I'm very pro-choice, basically, in every way. Choosing what you feel is best for you. So that's what I always want to put out there, as well as being a safe space for people who are exploring alternate methods to kind of what is status quo. So for myself, I was diagnosed with MS, and I had a 3-month period before between my diagnosis and before I could get in to see a neurologist at the MS clinic in Toronto. And in that time, I started to explore self-healing, and I had beautiful successes. And I was like, I walked into my appointment at the neurologist that, MS medication specifically, do not slow the progression of the disease. They're very, focused on managing symptoms for people. And because I was symptom free by this point, I, politely declined the medication. And that's a very personal choice. I'm not putting that out there to be like, go against what your doctors are telling you. But I felt at that point, and I experienced so many times after that, this, intense persuasion to go on these medications that for me didn't have any data supporting them that they would actually slow the progression of my disease. I kept up with my regular testing and measuring my lesions on my brain and spine. And 5 years later, my neurologist finally said to me, I don't think you need to be on medication for MS because, whatever you're doing is working. But there was a lot of time in between, the initial diagnosis and that point that I felt like I was pretty much, on my own. And I was very isolated, and I didn't even really talk about it to a lot of people until recently. I kind of felt I had to prove that I was capable of doing this healing work, because the doctors kept telling me, you're going to have a relapse every year. You're going to have a relapse after you have your daughter. So it became very personal, the journey of that. And I just wanted to put out to the world, that there are other alternatives sometimes to medications if you don't feel safe taking them. And that is a controversial topic for sure. People, don't like that. I'm very, like I said, I medication saved my mom's life. I know so many people who have been on medication for mental illness or mental health who have been just incredibly happy with their experiences. I'm so supportive of anybody's choice. But again, I want to create that safe space with these posts and with these conversations to, to give people, to land a soft place to land on, I'll say, where they can come and they can come and feel comfortable, if they don't always just go with the flow of things, if they're feeling resistance, that they have somewhere they can go. So and that's kind of where it comes from.
Yeah, I think you're doing a beautiful job of doing that.
Thank you.
And I feel there is a sweetness and a love and a genuine aura about your post. I never feel like it's not a safe place to have a conversation. In fact, I think I've told you this before. Whenever you post, like, let me give an example. Whenever you post a picture of yourself in your underwear, because you do, and it's beautiful and gorgeous, you make me want to go and post a picture of myself in my underwear, which, by the way, I have never done.
I love that. So
I know. I think you said that to me when I told you that last time. I was like, every time you post a pic in your underwear, make me want to go do the same thing. Not there yet, but that makes me kind of wonder then, like, have you noticed when you talk about different topics, are you stirring up different what kind of responses are you getting? Like, what kind of conversations are you starting? And are you notice a difference between if you're talking about body image or death or spirituality or self-healing? Like, do you get more conversations started around different topics? Or
for sure. I would like to just preface by saying I feel so safe in my community. Like, it's a small but mighty group of mostly women, women, people identifying as women. And, it's a beautiful place to share. I've never had anyone assertively or aggressively come after me for a post or a troll, as we'll call it. But I have had really hard conversations in my DMs. And, I've heard from people that, they feel uncomfortable with things I've shared, or they don't understand me. And it's a lot of conversation, right? It's long messages and responses and listening and trying to help people understand your point of view, not sway or persuade, but talk to them and help them to understand, nothing is ever intended as being offensive. Nothing's ever intended from that way. It's all personal experience. And that's all I'm trying to share. Specifically recently, when I, shared that due to my autoimmune conditions, I was going to be waiting for some more data before I'll be taking a vaccine for COVID-19. I had a lot of people come out, both telling me they felt the same way for their own personal reasons, or, the other opposite, that I'm in a privileged position to be making that decision, and which I, of course, agree with. But again, the conversations are constructive. I find that the people who reach out are doing so because they care to. They're not dismissing what I'm saying. They're really, trying to find common ground, which is really, really beautiful. And again, I have to come back to the place where I have to realize every time that not everyone's going to agree with this, and that's okay. And I need to continue to maintain this bridge where people feel safe to come across and have a conversation versus, blocking off to the rest of the world. And that's why I really try to share in a way that is inclusive and not, if you believe this, you're this. And I've had that type of thinking, especially in the last couple of years. And it's something that I have to work through myself. And once I do, it makes it a lot easier to, share from a place of honesty and openness versus, resistance.
Can you speak to the timing of these topics? Like, for example, when you shared about not getting the vaccine right away and wanting to get more information and waiting on it, that was like a key time for you to be sharing that in your stories, because vaccines has just opened up that week for anyone our age, right? And I was like, oh my gosh, everyone's going to be deciding right now. And I was afraid to open up social media that week, at all, because I was undecided. And it's like, nope, there's too much vaccine talk on social media right now, and I'm undecided. I need to think this through first before I go in and consume everyone else's opinions. And the only person I feel like I really did truly engage with was you, because I understand like your intentions behind it. And so I did see a lot of people responding to your story. And you had a question sticker about like, what are your thoughts on this? And I was like, you know what? I'm really nervous. I'm leaning into it though. And you're someone I feel comfortable engaging with, but the timing of it was like, oh, that was the icky week where we all kind of had to face that decision, and you went for it. So for me, or for a lot of us listening, we might want to hold off until the topic has cooled off a little bit, but you went for it like right away. Like, can you speak to having just how did you decide that?
I love that you are so, like, the way that your mind works is so beautiful. It's so intentional and so strategic. And for me, that was just not at all strategic. Literally, what had happened was I'd read an article the night before about if you go to my page, you'll be able to see in a hot minute that I have a lot of resistance towards, the system of healthcare and pharmaceutical companies in Canada, in the US, and beyond. But there's, I just find it very challenging to understand how it all works. But I'd read an article the night before about how even though taxpayers like us paid towards the R&D and the development of the vaccines, that now those pharma companies that came forward with the vaccines are trying to hold IP on those vaccines, and they don't want to release the recipe to, say, a country that's suffering massively with COVID-19 right now. I know India was mentioned in that article specifically, that there are manufacturing facilities all over the world that could be producing vaccines, and that actually most people on Earth could be vaccinated by now if those recipes were shared. And that was a real painful thing for me to read about, because I have witnessed so many friends who have given up so much in this time. And so many of us have been asked to give up so much with our children, their development, their, activities, their schools for a lot of people, our businesses, our small businesses, our capability of, our livelihoods in a lot of cases. And it was a struggle for me to read about that and understand that, these pharma companies aren't held to that same standard. Of, sacrifice in this time. And so I was just pissed off when I wrote all that.
Okay.
When I shared that. Yeah. So, obviously it was all coming out in the media around the same time, but, it wasn't a strategic thought. And a lot of times I'm very emotional based. That's part of who I am. So, I will share things that I feel passionate about in the moment. And there have been times I'm like, I think I could have been a bit more, I could have waited on that a bit till my emotions, I rode the wave a bit longer and came back to a flatter surface. But for the most part, I think it's very true. Like I said, it's very true. It's intuitive, what you're seeing on my pages and stuff like that.
So when we get to your Instagram or we listen to your show, we know that we're getting what Natalie is going through in the moment. Very authentic. I like that.
Yeah.
So not some strategy, just you felt it and you needed to share.
Yes, exactly. And that's a beautiful thing about social media is it's so connective. I had so many beautiful conversations that day from both perspectives and learned so much. And I hear and understand people. And that's the other thing, I think, because I was, I've had some adversity, a little bit of adversity in my life, that I can really, I feel confident in my ability to understand different perspectives. So that's been really nice too. And it always leads to something and ladders up to something more. And that's what, I think being in tune with your intuition is so important, because it leads you where you need to go.
And I've talked about intuition already on this show, and it's just so important, something you need to lean into. But I wanted to talk to you a little bit more about this well-rounded approach that you take, because you always tend to talk about a topic or bring a topic forward that you seem so like well educated about or well-rounded, like you have considered a lot of different perspectives. So I wanted to ask you, like, where do you source your information, or where do you gather a lot of the information that you take in about each topic?
Yeah. Well, firstly, I want to start by saying I have a really diverse group of thinkers around me. So, I have some beautiful friendships and relationships with people who, very close to me, who believe various different things. So I get a lot of insight from them, and it helps me. I think when we know people personally, it's so much easier to understand them, right? Like, I've had so many people reach out to me being like, well, I expect everyone to get the vaccine, but I don't expect you to, because I like know your story. And I'm like,
oh my
okay. But it's so funny, because like, that's the way we are, right? It's so easy to like other people and be like, well, that's them, I don't know them, I don't know their story, I'm going to make it. I try to counter back being like, well, consider that maybe other people might have a similar story to me. But anyways, back to your question. Yeah, I feel like I just source things as much as I can, and I try to read various different media. Like, I don't have a lot of trust for media and different sources, so I try to read different perspectives from different media outlets. I also do a lot of sourcing, like when I share anything about anything scientific, like the nocebo effect. I've done some stuff on epigenetics, the placebo effect, that type of thing. I'll go to like scientific papers and get sources, and I'll put a slide at the end of my posts about where that was sourced from, because I think that's really important for people to understand. I think if we have to have credibility when we're sharing that type of thing, but a lot of it is my personal experience too, and just my literal feelings about things that I'm sharing. Very opinion based. So I'll read things and I'll just be like, I read this. I'll read things and I'll just be like, I read this, and I'll always talk about where it's coming from, and this is what I feel about it, type thing.
Thank you for sharing that. I was always curious, like, where does she do her research? And it sounds like you pull in from a lot of different places. So I was always curious, like, what's her go-to? And I love that you said that you've surrounded yourself with a diverse group of thinkers. It's like, yeah, you know what? The people that we surround ourselves do have the most influence on us. And that's usually the person we're bouncing off our big ideas or asking our big questions to. So thanks for just being honest and saying, I ask the people around me, right? And it's really cool that they are diverse thinkers and that you're not just surrounded by people that feel the exact same thing all the time, which just allows you to expand and grow a little bit faster in life, or at least get this beautiful perspective that you have. I feel that you have. So I want to ask you a question.
Oh no, go ahead. Sorry.
Okay. So I want you say that a lot of your stuff is like emotionally driven and in the moment. I like that, but can we talk a little bit about the emotion of fear? Like, have you ever been afraid to share your opinions and be wrong, or ever afraid of voicing your opinion and then facing cancel culture or people unfollowing you or completely leaving? Like, you said that the door is open, but what if everybody walked out? Like, does that ever come to your mind, that thought?
Such a beautiful question, because it's, of course, something everyone thinks about when they're trying to build a business, when they're trying to, get their message out there. For me, I feel like the authenticity is just so important, and that's been a lesson that has been learned along the way. I have, of course, had that butterfly feeling in my stomach when I've clicked post or publish, or I've shared a podcast that, I know might rub people the wrong way or anything like that. But I think as long as I'm staying true to myself, that's all that's important. Because if everyone walked out the door to me being true to myself, they weren't my people, right? If I had to adjust who I am to keep people in the room with me, then that's not safe for me. That's not who I am. That's not what I want to do here. And social media is hard because I feel like I could have grown a lot faster, done a lot of, a lot more had I pushed through on some things, or had I conformed to what people like and what people are drawn to and that type of thing. And I have recently come to a place of real comfort knowing that this journey is like a winding, bending road, and and how I am too.
Mm-hmm.
And being wrong is so beautiful. Cancel culture is something that I think everyone thinks about now. But I think Jamila said something so beautiful once about how, we don't want to create environments where people cannot evolve, right? Even if you did something in your 20s or, your teens even, that was, pretty bad. We still need to foster environments for people to grow and evolve in their knowing and their understanding of the world. And that's what I want to try to create. And in doing so, I hope that people feel the same way back to me. And I'm okay with being wrong. I'm actually hoping I'm wrong on a lot of things sometimes. I don't feel the same way back to me. And I'm okay with being wrong. I'm actually hoping I'm wrong on a lot of things sometimes. I don't, the need to be right for me isn't so important. The need to be true is very important. So I'm okay if things shift and I have to say, I've changed my mind on that. And I think saying to somebody you've changed, or you're not the same person anymore, is actually a beautiful compliment that we can all look to, because it's okay to change and grow, and we don't have to stay the same way forever. We don't have to think the same patterns that we used to think. And I think this whole existence, personally, I believe that it is just an unfolding of getting to the bottom of who you really are. And the world wants us to be something, and for us to come back to that space and understand the truth of who we actually are, and being brave enough and courageous enough to actually stand up and be that person is incredibly important, especially on social media. So that's kind of how I feel about that.
I wish more people felt that way, but it's hard because I feel like we've been raised in a way, like our generation's been raised and told, like, once you put it on the internet, it's there forever. There's no
Mm-hmm.
taking it down. So we have to be very cautious of what we're putting out there. And I love that you have this belief, and you've already said it on today's podcast, is like, it's okay to change your mind. And a lot of us
Mm-hmm.
don't know that yet. It's a hard lesson to learn. I think that we're allowed to change our mind, and we're allowed to pivot, and we're allowed to be wrong. But so many of us, like, it's part of the human, I guess, just human experience, is to believe that,
Yeah.
being right is the way to go, but it's wrong. It's like being wrong is sort of the way to go too. I love that you just said, I hope sometimes I am wrong about some things. And I just instantly in my mind, I'm like, yeah, I hope I'm wrong about some things too, but I don't post about them, and you do. So that you have is just so inspiring. And thank you for putting that message on today's show. I want to ask you another thing too, that kind of still, for people that are listening and still have this fear about posting, posting something too controversial or too opinionated or too political, like, they're probably wondering, like, have you ever had anything backfire? Like, you say you have long conversations in your DMs with people. We don't get to see your DMs. We don't get to see that.
Mm-hmm.
But I bet in some of those DMs, some hurtful messages have been sent your way, after sharing your opinion of what you do. But can you speak to that? Like,
I think firstly, I just want to preface by saying, like, I don't believe that everyone has to be out here on their business Instagrams and stuff, talking about every single controversial topic. Like, that's my whole message, is just being true to yourself. So if there's something you feel super strongly about, get out there and share about it if you feel the need. If you're feeling a pull to share and you're like a little afraid of, what I would suggest is literally just trying to examine all sides first before you do. Try to be intentional and sit there and be like, what might I hear back? How might this hurt someone? How might this offend someone? And I think it just frames it in a really beautiful way when you put it out there. That's just my process. But there's a lot of people who are like, I don't give a you know what, about what people are going to say about this. I'm just putting it out there. And I have a lot of respect and reverence for people who do that too. Like that's their process. But for me, if you are feeling that little bit of nervousness, but there's like something in you that wants to put your message out there, I think just examining, how this might affect people before you put it on the internet is important. I've received some messages that have been hard to take. A lot of people who have gone a different route from a healing perspective, have taken medication, have a partner who has MS, or, it can be very uncomfortable for them to hear my method. It's something they don't like to go. Some people just don't like to go there. They don't want to hear that, there's a potential of self-healing. They don't believe that for themselves, which I think that means it wouldn't work for them. Like whatever you believe is so important. But those conversations have been so hard for me because I have never wanted anyone to think that I'm pushing a certain, a certain path on anybody else. All I wanted to do is just share, so that, because I remember when I was diagnosed, all I wanted to do was find people who were doing what I'm doing now and who were successful at it. And I couldn't find anyone. The internet was a lot different back then. But so that's really what I wanted to say there is like, I feel like that's the hardest thing I think is being misunderstood sometimes, and just being okay with the fact that people are going to understand you, are not going to understand you, that you're going to be misunderstood sometimes. And that comes back to that people pleasing and that space. So, I'm not going to lie. There's been times I've had a stomach ache after a message. I felt it viscerally in my body, that I try to just let that move through me, that energy. But I always try to come back to the fact that like, am I being true to myself? Am I sharing my truth and my experiences? Yes. Then that means I'm doing the right thing for me. And, but it's never fun. It's never fun to be criticized. It's never fun to feel like you've hurt someone or you've made somebody, upset with something that you've shared. It's not the intention behind it. But again, you will never, ever appeal to every single person. Not everybody's going to love what you have to share. Not everyone's going to love what you're selling. Not everyone's going to be into the stuff that you're into. And I think that's so important that we just acknowledge that early and often in this space and be like, okay, it's okay. Like I have, a lot of other people here who support what I'm doing, right?
And it's like you said, your door is always open. I feel like the kindest thing you could do for someone, it would just be inviting them to unfollow if your message isn't serving them, right? And I could see you wording that so nicely. Like, my door is always open. You do not have to.
It's always open, and I'll just close it behind you nicely.
Yeah. And then what you were saying is like feeling that ache in your body when you feel like someone's completely misunderstood you or they're trying just to hurt you. For me, maybe I felt that. Is that like similar to like that vulnerability hangover where you're like, oh God, maybe I should just delete that post? Like, have you ever gone back and deleted something because of that feeling that you get and the response you got, and it wasn't communicated properly, or you're doubting yourself and how you put it out there?
Such an interesting question. I don't think I've ever deleted a post for that reason. Like, I don't think I've ever come back and said, I think I've probably deleted things I've shared on stories. More so, like I'll put a story out and then I'm like, oh, I'll look on that person's page and I'll be like, I don't align with like everything this person is sharing. I don't, I wouldn't want there to be an assumption about that. It's such a short little clip that I can't really have like a long conversation about what this means to me. So I've done that. But no, for the most part, I think I take a long time to write my thoughts out with posts. And for the most part, I think I'm pretty intentional about it. Even if it is from a place of emotion, I'll often spend like an hour writing a caption and being like, this is, coming from the soul post. So for the most part, I don't think I've gone back and changed anything for the reason of like, oh, I've hurt someone, or I honestly get mostly, constructive feedback, positive feedback and constructive feedback. So I don't think I've ever had a point where somebody's like, you've really hurt my soul with this. Like, can you not do that? Or, anything like that. I've had conversations kind of off social media in that way where I've learned and grown in that way, but not so much on this page.
I wanted to ask you, like, what would be the best advice for people that are ready to speak their truth and have a voice about something? And you've already kind of hinted that, and I love what you said. It was like, if you're feeling the pull to share, like lean into that pull and then try to examine all sides first, and then try and come up with some ideas of how people might respond to it and how this hurt someone. Is there anything else you wanted to add to that for someone that's just eager to put their first real big opinion out there or be a little more controversial?
Yeah, I mean, I think it starts with how you're consuming content too. So if you're consuming content and you're looking at something and being like, well, that means they're that you're labeling, you're being harsh with your thinking, softening first around that, because that's just going to reflect how you feel about your own posts. And that's going to reflect how your audience responds to your posts. That's what I truly believe. So if you're if you want to be free to share, you have to be okay with the fact that there are other people who are going to have differing opinions to yours that are also free to share, right? That's just something that we have to be okay with. So that's a hard thing for a lot of people, and myself included. Like, there's a lot of times I'm like, well, they shouldn't be able to share that. That's dangerous information. That's that. And it's like, no, like, I have to be able to be okay with the fact that this is called freedom of speech for a reason. And that starts with, with me, that I need to be, not have to agree with what people are saying, but be okay with the fact that they're saying it. Everyone is coming from a different perspective, a different background, different bias. Like, we all have to just be okay with that, I think, from a baseline. And then again, don't consume their content if you're not comfortable with it. It's not something you align with. But I think that gives you a space where you can be like, I'm free now. I'm free because I'm giving them space from their perspectives, wherever they are in their corners of the earth, of the internet, to share. And now I have a voice that I can share. I'm not being censored by myself. I'm not being censored. I'm not out there censoring others, and I'm not going to censor myself anymore. And I think that gives you some freedom and autonomy to feel more comfortable to share. And yeah, like I said, if it's your truth, like, check in. Is it your truth? Is it really your truth? Is there something that you're sharing because you feel like you need to share something, you need to have a comment on this, you need to, so many people I think realize this during last, 2020 around after George Floyd's death and the amplification of the Black Lives Matter movement. It was so many people just shared to share. Like, they're like, I have to share without doing the work or the deep, research on what had been going on and that. And I think it's so important that we don't just share to share, right? We share from a place of our truth, our understanding. And it's not just like, oh, I have to put something out there really quick. And I think a lot of influencers specifically struggle with that. They have 1 million people in their inbox every day. And I've had this conversation on my podcast with a couple influencers who are saying, I remember Nicole Zajac saying to me that, somebody wrote to her and saying, why don't you ever post about acne? And Nicole was like, I don't have acne. Like, it's hard for me to post about stuff. Like, I don't know, I can't be everything to everybody. And it all comes back to that. So you have to be okay with the fact that there's going to be people who are like, well, she's sharing about that. Why isn't she sharing about that? Or, you only have your own experiences and perspectives to share from. I'm not saying people with influence shouldn't amplify important issues and have a responsibility to do that. But I think it's important that we are always doing it from a place of our knowing, our knowledge, and our intuition versus doing it to just do it, right?
I love that. I've actually had someone approach me and say, you should post about this topic. And I was like, I totally hear you, but I am not in a place to share because I think I said I wasn't educated on the topic enough, or I don't have enough time to formulate my own thoughts on this, but I appreciate it for, like, bringing this idea to mind. But I think once you do get a little bit more influence, the expectations are there. And I love that. Just think and, like, sit with it for a minute and then feel like, does this feel right for me to share? Would I be talking about this topic with my friends and family, like on the regular off of social media? And if not, then why do I feel the pull to put it on social media? Like, you don't always have to just be trendy, or post it because everybody else is posting it. So I feel like I have to post it. Otherwise, people are going to think I don't have a heart. It's like, well, who are they to judge you based on if you're posting something or not? Like the vaccines right now, for example, everyone's taking a video or a picture of them getting vaccinated. It's almost like they feel like they have to. I'm like, you can totally keep that private, right? You don't have to post that you got your vaccine or didn't get your vaccine. That can just be something that's private and that you keep to yourself. Or if you feel inclined and you really want to share it because it's your truth, right?
Exactly. Yeah, it's exactly such a beautiful way to like wrap it all up. What you just shared is like, it's so true. It's like give everyone the freedom first. Like, you need to have a baseline of understanding and compassion for everybody before you can be out there. Like, that's because if I didn't do that, it would just be baseline of understanding and compassion for everybody before you can be out there. Like, that's because if I didn't do that, it would just be, and again, I'm not like a queen of this. Like, I need to go on and be like, okay, there's times that I'm like, oh, I just do not like that. Like, I don't like that person's sharing that. I don't like that that's happening. And it's like, I have to check myself every time and be like, if I want this to be a safe space for me, this place on the internet, to be true and to share my honest truths, then this needs to be okay and safe for everybody. That's my biggest belief, is like, everybody should be free to do the same things. So it starts there.
That's such a great message, such a great belief. I hope that we can share. And you seem like you're a woman who is really tuned in and really knows yourself well. And I hope we can all get into that same space or same place eventually. And I feel like it all circles back to being able to show up confident and to be yourself. So the question I ask everyone on the podcast, Natalie, like, how do you define be yourself? So the question I ask everyone on the podcast, Natalie, like, how do you define confidence?
Such a good question. I think for me, confidence means a really strong inner knowing and a really strong level of self-understanding and compassion. Because there is no confidence if you're constantly seeking external validation, you're constantly seeking things from the external world to fill you up, to make you happy. So much comes from inside. So how do you accomplish that? Meditation, being conscious with yourself, taking minutes out to do self-care, having that beautiful relationship with your own self and connecting all the time, every day. It's the most important relationship you will ever have in your life. And doing that first so that you can then go out and be confident and have that courage and lead in a really effective way.
Answer. Such an authentic, good answer. And I love that you added in the meditation bit. I still think of you early in the morning. I know that you're an early riser and that you've shared with me once that you wake up really early, like 4:30 in the morning, and you do your self-care and you meditate. I too wake up pretty early in the morning some days, and I like to have my moment to meditate and sink into that inner knowing. And I just also know that Natalie is out there doing the same thing, not too far
I love
away.
that so much. It's so connective. It's really, and the energy is just so beautiful. Yeah. And I know that you really have created that, space that I think is so important here to have these conversations. And I just really commend you for that, for having you. I don't think people would go to your page. I know you have a background in yoga, but from just my perspective, with everything that you are sharing, you're so tuned in, you're so intentional, you are just amazing at what you do, and you have this like bright light about you. But to be open enough to like have conversations, to even invite me on this podcast, I think it just shows just the breadth of what you have inside you and what you can offer, and it's just really beautiful.
Oh, Natalie, that's so sweet. You're going to make me cry. Thank you. Well, I feel like since I've met you and I've gotten to know you over, I guess, this past year, I feel like this is someone that I need to tell people about. So I'm really happy you said yes to being on my show. If people want to connect with you and hear your show and follow you on Instagram, can you tell us all the places where people can find you?
For sure. So my show is called the Mind Your Own Life podcast. So you can search it on any of the major podcast platforms. And I can be found on Instagram. We've talked a lot about Instagram today. So it's at mindyourown.life. And I love DMs. I love connecting with people. So feel free to reach out. And again, if there's anything I said today that you want to have a conversation about, good or bad, the door is open for conversation always. Thank you so much for having me. It was a real gift and such a dream to connect with you in this way, Ashley.
Oh my gosh, my dream come true as well. Thank you, Natalie.
Thank you.
Awesome. And on to this week's tip of the week. So, say you're scrolling on Instagram and you stop and read a quote that you absolutely love. Immediately, you click it, you hit the little airplane, and you share that to your stories, right? Like we've all done it. But I just want to voice a warning about sharing these inspiring quotes, okay? Firstly, always read the caption before sharing the post. And second, know who the original poster is and what they're all about. Now, this might seem obvious, but why we need to focus on this, guys, is even if we agree with what the quote says, we may not agree with what the caption says or the opinions or values or mindset expressed in the caption says. Okay. And we don't want to align ourselves with things that we don't agree with. Also, if you don't know who the original poster is or what their values are, you might be sharing, aka supporting someone whose values really don't align with yours. So you really got to be careful with that. And another little tip, when you're sharing someone else's post to your stories, please try to remember to add some text of your own to let others know why you're sharing it. It helps with engagement and we appreciate it. So thank you all so much for listening to this week's episode. I will link all of Natalie's details in the show notes today, available at ashlyavismarketing.com/podcast. And if you head to Instagram right now and search hashtag the Ashley Avis podcast, you can always see my episode posts, and feel free to ask any questions about today's episode in the comments, and I'll respond as best I can. And if you are following along on Instagram, you've probably heard I'm launching a new workshop all about how to launch and sell on Instagram. So if you're a product-based or service-based business with something new to offer, this workshop will deliver the details, like the difference between selling and launching, what you need to do before you launch anything, and then my personal 7-day launch plan with a step-by-step to help you get your followers to decide whether or not they want to buy from you or not, right? So head to ashlyavismarketing.com/launch to sign up for that 2-hour workshop. That's ashlyavismarketing.com/launch. Okay, that's all for me, folks. Catch me next Tuesday when I grab a lawyer friend and we get some legal information all business owners must know if they want to be too legit to quit. Thank you for listening to another episode of the Ashley Avis podcast. If you like what you heard, subscribe, leave me a rating, or even better, tell a friend about the show. You can grab all of today's show notes